Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm going to be doing a quick review of March to Glory, a game that you've seen a little bit of on the channel of late, and actually this video will start with the next battle in the campaign, the Battle of Eylau, which was sort of a slugfest in the Eastern Prussian region against the French, and I believe principally the Russians, although I think some Prussians also showed up as well. It was a battle that was fought in the winter, and there was certainly some snowstorms involved. And I think it's an apt battle to show you here because I don't do a ton of formal reviews on this channel. Maybe that's something that should change, but it just is the reality right now. And I'm very grateful to Matrix and Slitherine for providing me a review copy of this game, which I believe I mentioned way back when, but just calling that out. What I will say is, in this video, March to Glory is not a game that I personally am a huge fan of. I've played it a little bit, and it has a couple of key shortcomings that I think prevent it from being the game for me. And in the format that it's released, I think it's doing itself a disservice, because I do think there is a marketplace for this game, but I don't think it's really on PC. And right now the game is only available on PC. Now, March to Glory is, as you know, a game that's made by Shenandoah Studio, which is a well-known studio for their mobile games. Shenandoah released Drive on Moscow, they released Battle of the Bulge. These are some of the early strategy gaming classics on iOS, and they hold up really well today. March to Glory doesn't, and I think the key problem is this. March to Glory is a turn-based Napoleonic war game, and it's a game that allows you to play a campaign of 14 different historical battles in which you can fight various historical fights such as Waterloo, Austerlitz, Jena, Eylau that you see in front of you, and many others. And while that would be a really interesting concept and not something that a lot of war games out there today do a good job of, certainly not modern war games, there's definitely games out there that cover these conflicts, but most of them are like in the Battleground series or things that look like they're straight out of the mid-1990s. The last sort of real-time version of it was that I can think of was built on the Sid Meier's Gettysburg engine. That was the Waterloo, Napoleon's last battle, and then Austerlitz, Napoleon's greatest victory, both again on the Sid Meier's Gettysburg engine. Now, there are other games out there, certainly. Scourge of War Waterloo and Hist War, Le Gorgonards, or however you pronounce it, or I believe they have a newer version called Napoleon. Now, I haven't played either of the Hist War games. I have played Scourge of War. I was involved in that game's development. And what I will say is for either Hist War or Scourge of War, those are more... first off, they're real-time games. And second off, they are war games that are really meant for more of the groggy kind of folks. I suppose if you were, and this is based off reviews because I haven't played Hist War, but I suppose if you were more of a casual gamer, Scourge of War would have a little bit lower of a learning curve than Hist War. But in any event, those games are geared more toward the sort of groggy kind of players. But March to Glory is a relatively simple and straightforward game in terms of the way the battles work. There are 4 different unit types, although I really only noticed 3. You've got infantry, you've got artillery, you've got cavalry. Well, technically, the 4 is infantry, artillery, cavalry, and then generals. Additionally, there are some infantry units which seem to be called light infantry, but I haven't noticed that making any difference in the gameplay for them. So really, it's the 4 units I just mentioned. Infantry, artillery, cavalry, and generals. Now, I can't tell what generals do. I suppose they give your unit a buff or a morale perk or something like that. But generally, there's only one general that you have, and he's sort of your commanding officer on the battlefield. Almost always, from the French point of view, it's Napoleon. And this unit can kind of move around on the map and move between different units. The 3 units that matter as far as combat, infantry, artillery, and cavalry are designed reasonably interestingly in the game, where in order to achieve your goals, you need to use them effectively. And that gets down to the way the gameplay works. So it's a turn-based Napoleonic war game in which you get a chance to move your units, you can fight with your units, and then once all of your units have moved, you go and end the turn. You don't have to use everybody, but generally you do. And units are typically in one of three, infantry units are typically in one of three formations. There's a line formation where your forces spread out in a long line and can shoot at the enemy most effectively. There's an assault column formation, or a column formation, in which your troops kind of group together in a more narrow front, not as ideal for shooting at enemy infantry if they're shooting at you, but certainly better for charging an enemy line and trying to break that line. And then there's a square formation, which you don't actually get to choose to form that formation. Frankly, you don't choose to form any of the formations, but it is formed automatically when you're either attacked by enemy cavalry or enemy cavalry is very close nearby and a turn passes without anything happening. Now, these infantry formations are critical to the way the game plays out. I have not noticed cavalry or artillery having secondary formations. It really just seems to be the infantry that has the secondary formations. And the reason their formations are important is because it really gets down to how you're successful in this game. What I mean by that is infantry in square formation is incredibly vulnerable to enemy artillery. Not very vulnerable to cavalry, but very vulnerable to artillery or infantry charges from infantry units in column formation. So if, essentially, the way this game works, it's a turn-based war game where you're going to move your units from one side of the map to the other side of the map, and then you're going to try and hit the enemy in a less advantageous position. So if you're an infantry unit and you're trying to destroy another enemy infantry unit, and the base or the core of most armies is infantry, what you're probably going to want to do is the most effective tactic would be to have a cavalry unit of yours approach the enemy infantry, perhaps even charge the enemy infantry to cause them to change into square formation. Once that enemy infantry unit changes to square formation, your artillery unit is going to want to bombard that infantry with a bombardment, which will then cause the infantry to lose substantial morale and infantry strength. Then, once that's done, if you have more artillery, great, you'll bombard them again. If you have infantry handy, you can either choose to hit them with a volley, having your troops in line and firing a volley at them, or you can try to charge them and melee them. If you think you can break their line, it might make more sense to melee. If you just want to kind of wear them down, then hitting them with volley fire would be appropriate. And the way the gameplay sort of evolves through the course of a battle is a bunch of these little different scenarios where your infantry units and their infantry units and your cavalry units and their cavalry units are all trying to use combined arm tactics to get an advantage over your adversary. So the more enemy units that you can effectively break down, the more easy you can sort of bring a larger force to bear against the enemy. So obviously if you both come to battle with 10 units but you destroy 2 of theirs and they only destroy 1 of yours, you have an advantage. You can now, bring more men to bear against them than they on you. And it's kind of this puzzle of how do I most effectively break and cause these enemy units to retreat or ideally be destroyed. And the game is managed through a victory point system, so every battle that you fight, you have objectives to take certain hexes or hold certain hexes to give you victories, but you also can win through sort of a margin of victory, where if you destroy enough of the enemy army and they don't destroy enough of yours, if you get to a certain victory point threshold, then you can win without even taking your objectives. It kind of assumes the enemy army breaks. So every turn, these maneuvers are, you've got a moving phase where you're moving your units, you're choosing to fight your units. There's just really one phase, and you choose to move your troops, attack your troops, and whatnot in a given turn. And your goal is to either get to a certain victory point margin, which gives you an automatic victory, or to take certain hexes on the battlefield, which represent a victory. Now, the problem I have with this, and by the way, when you fight, you can either kill an enemy unit, you can degrade an enemy unit's morale, and that's kind of about it. So you've got like these infantry these strength icons with each unit. You've got an icon that kind of represents what its attack, its movement, its different characteristics are. And if you hover over an enemy unit you might attack, it'll give you sort of an estimate on how that combat may play out. Obviously, it's a little bit random, so that combat may play out differently than what your estimate says. But you've got these little red icons or yellow icons, which represent either killed or wounded. So every time you attack or defend or whatnot, these wounded or these wounded/killed or these morale hits occur. And if the enemy loses enough strength or enough morale, they can break and retreat. they can retreat, and if they retreat, sometimes another unit nearby, if it has low morale as well, may choose to retreat as well. It's called a cascade retreat. And you earn victory points through defeating enemy troops by killing them or by lowering their morale. And again, if you get to that appropriate victory point margin, then you win the battle. But sort of the problem I have with this game, and one other piece is there's also cities and towns. Cavalry are not able to attack towns. They can attack infantry in the open. They can attack infantry in towns. Cavalry is also very effective against artillery. Artillery is more effective at range against cavalry than infantry. Artillery is more effective against infantry when it's an assault column than infantry in a line column. And infantry fire is more effective against infantry in an assault, but it is less effective to charge an enemy infantry unit in assault column. So there are these sort of balancing pieces that you need to kind of learn to maximize your puzzle solving skills in this game. It's an interesting game. It's kind of a puzzle game that, again, doesn't... To me, the problem with this game is it doesn't feel like any particular Napoleonic battle. It's very formulaic. It's very sort of sleuthy in the way that you play through. And it's not incredibly deep. These battles can be played out generally around 45 minutes to an hour. The game also has a random sort of sandbox battle generator. It has a multiplayer option. But to me, when I play a war game, if I'm playing a Napoleonic game, one of the reasons I'm playing that is to recreate history and see what sort of strategic or tactical challenges the game offers that allows me to feel what it might have been like to be in a decision-making moment during a Napoleonic battle, or to see the spectacle, or to understand the geography. This game doesn't get at any of that. This game has the historical battles in name only. I fought the Battle of Pratzen Heights, and it was basically move your infantry and your armory and whatnot from the left side of the map to the right side of the map. Furthermore, the biggest challenge is how you bring your appropriate forces to bear on the enemy so that you can sort of solve that puzzle that I was telling you about, but there's no real maneuver. The biggest challenge from a maneuver perspective is making sure that the right unit of yours is in the front, because if you have two units stacked next to each other, one in front, one in back, the unit in back can't fire. Unless it's an artillery unit on a hill. Geography isn't really communicated very well in the game. There are hexes that say hill, and there's some graphics, but they don't seem to play much into the gameplay. It doesn't give you an easy way of understanding the topography of whether an artillery unit can fire, and it also doesn't give you the opportunity to maneuver. And outside of battles like Olo, again, I butchering the pronunciation, but outside of these types of slugfest battles, maneuver was a big part of Napoleonic battles. Heights and locations were big parts of these battles. Austerlitz, sort of the mind game of Napoleon, outwitting his adversaries at every turn. Topography was absolutely huge. The Pratzen Heights were absolutely vital to the French military's ability to win the Battle of Austerlitz, and the significance of taking the Pratzen Heights was substantial, and yet this game doesn't communicate any of that. It doesn't communicate sort of a sense of being there. It doesn't communicate any sort of real Napoleonic challenges about flanking or whatnot. It doesn't really put you in charge of managing your troops' formations. It's all kind of automated. None of the battles have a historic feel or flair to them. The game doesn't have any really interesting sort of timing challenges. I think one of the things that Shenandoah Studios did a really good job with in both Drive on Moscow and Battle of the Bulge was these were games that made you make critical decisions about time. Battle of the Bulge, for example. You only had a certain number of movements, only a certain number of turns to get to your objective. And it was a very small number of turns. It was very compressed, whereas these battles tend to all be 20-plus turns. And in a 20-plus turn battle, by the end, you're about ready. You're about done. The enemy army's about destroyed. Your army's about exhausted. That's been my experience in every one of these battles. And so that there's really no importance of time. There's no challenges of terrain other than making sure your artillery can continue to fire on the enemy. There's no challenge of logistics. There's no challenges of maneuver. It's in essence a go straight at 'em game. You move from the left side of the map to the right side of the map. You move from the bottom of the map to the top of the map. And you literally just march straight at the enemy and then make sure that you're targeting your fire appropriately on the enemy so that you can reduce his formation faster than it can reduce yours. And that's the challenge of this game. It has a similar graphical appeal and aesthetic as Battle of the Bulge. To me, it looks and feels like a game that probably should be on iPad. It's an interesting game. If you shorten the battles a little bit, I think you could really make this game kind of an interesting sort of time waster. You know, I'm on my iPad, I'm just kind of playing around, I don't have a lot to do, I'm watching TV, let's play a little bit of this game. I think you could do well there. But it lacks strategic and tactical depth. It lacks really any sort of historical ambiance other than some of the music and the graphics. It lacks any sort of interesting battlefield tactical decisions. It's just a rather underwhelming game. Again, it's sort of a casual, just pick up and play and just kind of move things around on a hex map. It could be interesting on an iPad, but I'm not sold on it as a PC game. It certainly is too light for the casuals, I think. If you're casually getting into war games, this isn't the game for you. If you're a hardcore war gamer, this isn't the game for you. I'm not really sure who this game is billed toward, other than people with sort of a desire to see a Napoleonic skin on something. And even so, there's better options. So yeah, I don't, you know, I struggle with this game because I don't know who it's really for. I don't really know what it's trying to do. I wasn't sure if it's an attempt to be more of a competitive game where you have multiplayer, which admittedly I really haven't touched, but I also don't really see the appeal of this. It feels like the game that would be really formulaic, and from a multiplayer game, what are they going to do? Outmaneuver me? No, they're just going to figure out how to better shoot at one unit than me and how to better reduce my force than me. And there seems to be something vaguely, rather substantially unsatisfying. I've played through the skirmish mode as well, so most of my criticisms are sort of geared toward the campaign mode of the game. The skirmish mode is basically identical to the campaign battles, except that in the campaign battles you get to assign 6 units with an experience perk, which, okay, you know, I can assign experience, which gives units various bonuses, but I don't understand why you do that. Like, why do I get to assign certain units experience in the campaign game and not the, you know, standalone sandbox game, unless there's some sort of linking scenarios, but there's no linking casualties between battles, there's no linking experience, there's no core force that you build up, there's no, you know, importance of, oh, this is my guard unit, therefore I'm going to build up some sort of rapport with them. There's none of that. It's just a linked series of battles which have nothing at all linked about them other than the fact that you've got to win one to get to the next. No carryover casualties, no experience, no camaraderie, nothing. The only thing that the game really seems to link together is in the actual introduction screen of the campaign. It does give you sort of a story that this individual French soldier is telling you that he's basically undergoing as the campaign progresses from Austerlitz to Jana to Eylau all the way through. But yeah, I don't really, okay, whatever. Like, great, I get like a 30-second story clip. I can't lose a battle. If I do, I don't progress. So again, the campaign is kind of a, what's the point? Is it really a campaign, or is it just a sort of level that you're trying to go through? Do things really get harder? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. It's a bit of an underwhelming game, and I was hoping for something a little bit better. I was hoping, I really want more Napoleonic games. I think it's an underserved segment of the wargaming market, but I don't think this game really does anything for me. Again, if you're looking for sort of a puzzle game with a bit of a Napoleonic flair, this might be for you. If you're looking for something casual to play for just a short period of time before the next thing comes up, this might be the game for you. But in any sort of meaningful war game or attempting to bring a casual person into wargaming, I don't really think this does much of anything for anyone who's not just kind of shooting the breeze for a little bit. And that's fine. I play games for that as well. But frankly, I'd rather play something more fast-paced like Carrier Deck if I'm going to do that than something like this. And if I want to play something Napoleonic, I'm probably going to play something like Scourge of War, or maybe if I ever pick up Hist War, or if I'm looking for something a little bit more casual and hex-based, maybe something like I think it's like Hunted Cows Studios has a series of hex-based turn Napoleonic games, which I think pose more interesting challenges than this one. So yeah, just a little bit of an underwhelming title. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoy. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.